President Trump is still fuming over an escalator mishap that happened at the United Nations. Take a good look if you haven't seen this video yet. The escalator suddenly stops as soon as the president steps on. He and First Lady Melania Trump are jolted for a second, then they walk their way up the stairs themselves. President Trump was so angry about this that he made sure to mention it during his address to the General Assembly.
All I got from the United Nations was an escalator that on the way up stopped right in the middle. If the First Lady wasn't in great shape, she would have fallen, but she's in great shape. These are the two things I got from the United Nations, a bad escalator and a bad teleprompter.
So this was more than 24 hours ago, but it's still an issue that's on top of mind for our president. He just posted a long complaint on social media. This is what he wrote, in part: "I demand an immediate investigation. No wonder the United Nations hasn't been able to do the job that they were put in existence to do. All security tapes at the escalator should be saved, especially the emergency stop button. The Secret Service is involved. Thank you for your attention to this matter," end quote. NewsNation's Joe Khalil has been following Escalator Gate. Are we calling that on the Hill? Is it Escalator Gate? Hi, Joe. What can you tell us? What's the latest?
I guess everything gate now. So look, obviously President Trump is still bothered by this because he just put out that lengthy statement on Truth Social. You referenced, he mentioned it twice in his speech yesterday, although it sounded like he mentioned it in sort of a lighthearted way. But later on in the day, you did have Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt demanding an investigation and referencing a Times of London report from Sunday, so 2 days before, that referenced that there were allegedly some staffers at the UN joking over the weekend about doing this very thing, about sort of hijacking the escalators when President Trump went on them, and then sort of coincidental, right, that the president, as soon as he took his first step, and the First Lady did, that the escalator stopped. Now, there is some reporting from the UN, sources there that say that actually the stoppage in the escalator was triggered by one of President Trump's own staff who was running ahead of the president, one of the videographer's staff, and that sort of running then has an automatic trigger. There was some reporting around that, but clearly that was not good enough for the White House, because again, today, demanding an investigation. The UN does investigations. I've never heard one about an escalator now. I'll just mention that President Trump did also reference this a third time yesterday when he was sitting just across the way from the UN Secretary General. They had a lot of serious topics to talk about. President Trump, again, sort of jokingly brought it up. So it has been top of mind. And again, we're getting the statement now from the White House.
Yeah, the statement just coming down a little while ago. I do want to switch gears. Not that Escalator Gate isn't serious, but a more serious story. And that, of course, is Russia. The Kremlin rejected President Trump's claim, saying for the first time that Ukraine could win back all of its territory. What is Russia saying to that, Joe?
Yeah, well, first of all, Hannah, it's an incredible about-face for President Trump. His stance changed pretty dramatically just a couple of months ago, saying Ukraine would have to give up serious swaths of its territory, now saying that may not be the case, and actually criticized Russia heavily, essentially calling them weak militarily and economically. You can imagine that did not land well with the Kremlin. Just today, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov putting out this statement in response to President Trump calling Russia a possible paper tiger. Dmitry Peskov saying Russia is in no way a tiger. He says still, Russia is more compared with a bear. There are no paper bears. He went on to talk about how Ukraine is essentially losing their leverage every day. They do not come to the table, Russia says. Ukraine's bargaining power gets worse. This is the rest of that statement there. So interesting. This is what President Trump said, by the way, that sparked all of this. Here, take a listen.
Frankly, Ukraine is doing a very good job of stopping this very large army. It's pretty amazing. You know, this is a war that should have ended in 3 days, 4 days. People said it was going to be very quick, and you got to hand it to the Ukrainian soldiers.
And again, not just praising Ukraine, but he went on to really criticize Russia, and on Truth Social saying that effectively a strong army, a strong military would have been done with this conflict within a few weeks and wouldn't have allowed it to drag on for years. And then he painted a really dire and dark picture of Russians that are now standing in line waiting for hours just for a can of gasoline because the country and the Kremlin are using their money not for their citizens or their society, but for this endless war with Ukraine. So it was a stark move. It was a stark change in his position, one that some Republicans here on Capitol Hill, some hawks against Russia, have really embraced.
And this, of course, coming after Ukrainian President Zelensky spoke to the General Assembly today, just a few blocks from here at the United Nations. Yeah. Joe Khalil live on Capitol Hill for us. Thank you for that, Joe.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.